My name is Thomas Blake. I'm 48 years old, and for the past 2 decades, I've worked as a logistics consultant for manufacturing firms across the U.S. I live just outside Raleigh, North Carolina, in a quiet house I once thought would be filled with more than silence by now. Elena and I had been married for 16 years. We met at a conference in St. Louis. She was giving a talk on supply chain reform, and I was one of the few in the audience actually listening. She was sharp, elegant, and absolutely sure of herself. That confidence pulled me in fast. Within a year, we were married. It worked. For a long time. Or at least, it looked like it did. The moment things shifted didn't feel like a blow. More like a draft sneaking in through a cracked window. Small changes. Late nights she didn't explain. Trips that used to be we slowly became just me this time. She started referring to the house as the property. Then one afternoon, standing in our kitchen, she told me she wasn't happy. Said she needed something more. Not louder, not warmer, just more. The word hung between us like steam from a boiling kettle. "I've met someone," she said. "His name is Daniel. We've been talking for a while." No yelling, no apologies, just facts. I didn't respond right away. I just stood there, watching the light shift across the granite countertops we'd picked out together. The space between us was no longer emotional. It was architectural. She said she'd be moving out within the month. "We'll keep it civil," she added, like it was a transaction. Maybe for her, it already was. But she didn't know everything. 3 months earlier, I'd quietly restructured our shared property. Not because I expected this, but because something felt unstable. I'd learned long ago that insurance only works when it's in place before the storm. So when she said she'd be taking her share of the house, I just nodded. Because I knew something she didn't. The contract she never asked to read had already drawn a line. And this time, she was standing on the wrong side of it. I didn't beg her to stay. I didn't ask why. By the time she packed her things and left, I had already started pulling away in places she never noticed. The morning after Elena moved out, I walked through the house in silence. Every room echoed. Furniture still in place, but the warmth had gone with her. A scarf left on the back of a chair, half a bottle of her shampoo in the shower. Ghosts, all of them. Rock bottom isn't always dramatic. Sometimes it's just quiet. No shouting. No tears. Just a man alone in a house he thought would look different by now. I spent that first week doing small, mindless things. Tightening loose screws on cabinet handles. Vacuuming under the bed. Fixing a leaky faucet in the guest bathroom. Not because it mattered, but because it gave my hands something to do while my mind sorted through the wreckage. At work, I kept my schedule full. Back-to-back calls, logistics reports. Efficiency was easier than emotion. People asked how I was. I said, "Doing fine," and they nodded, relieved they didn't have to ask again. But at night, it was just me. Me and the echo. It would have been easy to spiral, lose myself in blame or bitterness. Instead, I chose the opposite. I started waking up earlier. I stopped drinking at night. I hired a financial planner, reviewed every joint asset, and redrew the entire map of my future. I went back to the gym, started eating meals at the table again. Little things that reminded me I could still build something out of what was left. It wasn't about getting back at her. It wasn't about winning. It was about stability, control, laying the first stone in a new foundation, one that didn't crack under someone else's decisions. Rock bottom isn't the end. It's just the point where you stop digging and start building. In the weeks that followed, I didn't chase closure, didn't text her late at night. Didn't scroll through her social media to see what restaurant she was eating at, or which friends stayed loyal to her version of the story. Instead, I practiced something I hadn't in years. Stillness. Not the passive kind where you wait, but the deliberate kind. The kind where you stop reacting and start observing. At first, the silence was uncomfortable. I was used to motion, travel, phone calls, contracts, negotiations. Noise had always been part of my rhythm. But now, I was learning what it meant to sit with the absence of it all. And in that quiet, I began to hear myself again. Each morning, I made coffee without rushing. No meetings to catch a flight for. No texts from Elena asking me to pick something up on the way home. Just steam, sunlight through the blinds, and the subtle sense that I was waking up to my own life for the first time in years. I didn't try to replace her, didn't jump into distractions or make promises to move on. I let the space breathe. And in that breathing room, I started to notice patterns. How she had begun withdrawing long before she confessed it. How I had ignored signs in the name of being understanding. How I had given more than I'd protected. Time, trust, and access. Stillness doesn't numb you. It sharpens you. It gives you a mirror you can't look away from. In that mirror, I saw someone I could rebuild from. Not the man who had everything figured out, but the one who now understood what mattered enough to protect. Elena wanted movement, wanted change, wanted more. I wanted clarity. And in the stillness, I found it. Not all answers come with action. Some arrive in the quiet, when you finally stop looking outward and start listening inward. It was a Thursday afternoon when I got the call. The kind of call that doesn't start with hello, just a heavy voice on the line, already halfway into the problem. There's an issue with the house, my financial advisor said. For a moment, I didn't move, didn't speak, just listened. Apparently, Elena had attempted to initiate a secondary sale of the lake cabin we co-owned, a property passed down from my grandfather, nestled in the Blue Ridge foothills. Something she barely visited, but suddenly felt entitled to. She claimed we'd discussed selling it, said she had verbal consent, tried to transfer paperwork through an agent in her cousin's name. But there was a catch. The title was never in both our names. It had been placed under a family trust years ago, before we were even married. She hadn't bothered to check. She assumed, like always, that access meant ownership. Storms don't always come with thunder. Sometimes they arrive by email, in legal language, and forged signatures. I drove to the cabin that weekend, not out of fear, but to see it with my own eyes, to remind myself what was mine and what wasn't hers to take. The porch still creaked the same, pine needles scattered across the path. Inside, everything smelled like cedar and memory. I stood in the middle of the living room and realized this was more than property. It was legacy. Not just what my grandfather had built, but what I had protected without even realizing why. Elena wasn't malicious. She was desperate. She wanted a quick exit, but hadn't prepared for the weight of rebuilding from someone else's foundation. And me? I had weathered bigger storms, negotiation collapses, lost deals, hostile takeovers. This wasn't new ground, just personal this time. I called my advisor the next morning. Block every attempt. Document everything. No exceptions. Because storms will hit, but they don't get to take what you've anchored. 3 months after Elena left, I got an unexpected email. A notification from a real estate listing service I'd forgotten I'd ever subscribed to. One property had just been added to the local auction list. It was our old home, the same house she insisted on keeping after we separated. the one she once called our fresh start. But beginnings built on denial tend to collapse fast. From what I gathered, she had taken out a loan to renovate, then another to cover the first one. Her interior design business never took off the way she imagined. Eventually, the numbers caught up with her, and the bank didn't wait. I read the auction listing 3 times before picking up the phone. Not because I wanted the house back, not because I missed the memories, because I knew exactly what that property was worth. And more importantly, what it wasn't. I contacted the auction office, verified the paperwork, and placed a pre-auction offer. Clean. Cash. No contingencies. My credit was intact. My finances were steady. I'd done the work she thought I never would. A week later, the offer was accepted. Just like that. The house was mine again. When the final deed came in, I read every page. Not out of distrust, but because I've always believed that what you don't read can cost you everything. The moment didn't feel victorious. It didn't feel like revenge. It just felt complete. This wasn't about her anymore. It wasn't about reclaiming what was taken. It was about real estate, an asset, a clean line item, a strategic acquisition. But even so, I couldn't ignore the quiet symbolism. She walked away thinking she owned the future. And there I was, signing back ownership of the past she tried to offload. Not with noise, not with confrontation, just a signature and a set of keys. Sometimes you don't have to fight to win. Sometimes you just have to endure long enough for everything to fall back into place. The day I got the keys, I didn't go inside right away. I parked across the street, engine off, windows down, watched the breeze move through the oak trees that lined the yard, watched shadows shift on the front porch we once built together. When I finally stepped out, the gravel crunched underfoot like it always had. The siding looked a little more weathered, the flower beds neglected, but the shape of the home was the same. I walked up to the mailbox, expecting it to be empty. Instead, there it was. A letter addressed to her, Elena Whitaker, still printed in clean black ink. A catalog, some local coupons, a hand-addressed envelope from her sister. It hit harder than I expected, not because I missed her, but because of how permanent her name looked, like the house hadn't realized she was gone. I took the letters inside, placed them neatly on the counter, then stood in the center of the living room, letting the stillness fill the space around me. She had painted the walls a pale gray the year before we split. Said it made the place feel calm, modern, neutral. Now it just looked tired, like the color was holding on to something it couldn't name. I didn't unpack that day. I didn't move furniture or start changing the layout. Instead, I walked the perimeter of the house, room by room, slowly, taking inventory not of the things that were still there, but of the ones that weren't. Her absence had a shape. I could feel it. But so did the possibility of something new. I left the envelope with her name on the kitchen counter. I'd drop it off at her new address later. No note, no message, just the mail. That was all there was left to return. The house wasn't hers anymore. But her shadow still lingered in the places light hadn't yet reached. And that was okay. Because shadows only exist where something brighter is trying to come through. I never said a word about the house, didn't make a post about it, didn't text old friends, didn't even mention it to my coworkers. But somehow, word got around. It started with a message from a friend of Elena's. We hadn't spoken since the divorce, just a polite, "Hope you're well." Then, "I heard you bought the place back." Wow. I didn't reply. Then came another, from a mutual acquaintance. She didn't see that coming, huh? And then, quieter. "You handled it better than most would have." That made me pause, not because it felt good, but because it reminded me just how closely people watch from the sidelines. They never say much while the storm is happening, but once the dust settles, they start filling in their own narrative. Apparently, Elena had told people she sold the house, that it was her fresh start, that she and I had split everything evenly and moved on cleanly. No mention of the trust, no mention of the forged transfer, no mention of the part where she lost it all. I didn't correct anyone, didn't share documents or facts, didn't drag her name through a digital courtroom, because silence carries its own kind of weight, and it's often louder than any accusation. She knew. That was enough. She hadn't reached out since the settlement. No apology, no explanation. And that was fine. I didn't need her words. I had the deed, the quiet, the keys. People can tell whatever version of the story they want. But in the end, it wasn't about what they heard. It was about what I kept, what I rebuilt, and what I refused to lose. No matter how well she thought she'd planned her escape, closure didn't arrive with an apology. There was no phone call in the middle of the night, no teary confession, no dramatic confrontation in a parking lot. It came on a Tuesday morning. I was drinking coffee on the back deck. Light breeze, sky just starting to turn. Same view we used to sit in front of, back when things still felt solid. The mail had come early, mostly bills and flyers, but tucked between them was an envelope. No return address. Her handwriting. I opened it slowly. Inside, a check. No note. No explanation. Just a number. $38,500. The final portion of the funds she'd agreed to return in the settlement. It wasn't the money that hit me. It was the silence wrapped around it. Like she finally understood there was nothing left to say. That was closure. Not forgiveness. Not forgetfulness. Just a finished chapter. I didn't feel triumph. Didn't feel vindicated. Only stillness. Like watching the last ember burn out after a long fire. Warm. Quiet. Spent. I walked the envelope inside and set it on the kitchen table. The same table where we used to share coffee. The same table where we sat in silence long before either of us admitted something was wrong. Now it was just me, and it felt right. I deposited the check into a separate account, used it to renovate the upstairs guest room. New flooring, clean paint, new light fixtures. I didn't erase the past. I built something new on top of it. Because sometimes closure doesn't shout. It doesn't knock on your door or beg for one more chance. Sometimes it just shows up, quietly in a plain envelope, with no return address. And if you've done the work, if you've rebuilt the pieces they tried to take, you'll be ready to let it go without needing anything more. Restoration didn't happen all at once. It came slowly, in quiet weekends and small decisions. A new coat of paint in the hallway, the squeaky door to the laundry room finally fixed. Old photos taken down, not out of bitterness, but because they didn't match the man I was becoming. I didn't need to erase the past. I just didn't want to keep living in it. I replaced the living room rug, the one Elena picked out 5 years ago because it tied everything together. It was worn, frayed around the edges, just like we'd been near the end. I rolled it up, carried it to the curb, and stood there longer than I expected. Not sad, just reflective. Some things you outgrow without realizing. I started going for long walks again, something I hadn't done in years. Put in earbuds, let the world quiet down, and felt my thoughts stretch out for the first time in months. Neighbors waved differently now, not with pity, but with a kind of unspoken respect. They'd seen the moving trucks come and go, They'd heard whispers, drawn their own conclusions. I didn't correct them. I didn't need to. The house was getting stronger with each change, and so was I. I restructured my work schedule. No more late-night flights or endless hotel rooms. I took on fewer clients, but more meaningful ones. The kind of deals that made me think, not just earn. I hosted dinner once, just 4 people, close friends. We sat out back, string lights above, and for the first time in a long time, the place felt lived in. Felt like home. Restoration isn't just about repair. It's about reimagining who you are now, what you keep, and what you no longer carry forward. I didn't rebuild the life I had. I built the life that waited beneath it. Quiet, steady, mine. Some evenings, I sit on the porch with a cup of coffee, watching the sky change in slow motion. The wind moves through the trees the same way it always did, but it sounds different now. Quieter. Earned. The view hasn't changed much. The same hedges I trimmed for years. The same street lamp that flickers when the humidity gets too thick. But something about it feels entirely new. Maybe because this time, I'm not sharing it with anyone who might walk away. Not negotiating peace in silence. Not building a future with someone already halfway out the door. This view is mine. Fully. Legally. Emotionally. People think ownership is about money. Deeds. Titles. Contracts. But the real kind of ownership, it's when you can sit in your own skin, in your own space, and know you don't owe anyone an explanation for staying. The porch creaks a little under my weight, a sound that used to annoy me. Now it feels like a reminder. Some things hold, even after pressure. I think about Elena less these days, not because I'm trying to forget, but because she just doesn't take up space anymore. Sometimes a scar fades without you noticing, until one day you look down and realize it's gone pale, and it doesn't hurt when you touch it. This house is still just wood and glass. The paint will chip. The roof will need work. But every nail, every window, every room, I know what it cost me to keep them, and I'd pay it again. Not because it was easy, but because I know now. What you rebuild with your own hands lasts longer than anything handed to you. The porch light kicks on automatically as the sun drops behind the trees. And for the first time in a long time, I don't feel like I'm waiting for anything. This is the view, and it's mine.